Here we go.
All right. Okay, I think I can also, let me see if I can pull the chat out because I think I can. Okay, awesome. Okay, so today we're going to go through, I'm going to go through with you direct loan eligibility, and then we're going to talk about loan repayment a little bit as well. In my current role, I oversee our financial wellness program. So loan repayment counseling is a really big part of our financial wellness program at PCOM. And I know not a lot of schools focus really deeply into understanding the repayment of loans, but we are going to touch on that stuff quite a bit today toward the end of the presentation, just because I think as a financial aid administrator, it is really important for you to be able to at least get students started on thinking about loan repayment when they're getting close to that exit counseling point. But we're going to start with loan eligibility and, kind of make our way through the direct loan program. I can advance my slides. All right. Okay, so we're going to go through the loan program itself, the direct loan program, and the different types of loans there are. We're going to talk about how do you figure out how much loan a student is eligible for annually and also on the aggregate for their whole lifetime, and what those limits are and how that works. Okay, so there's mainly 3 different types of direct loans. This is pretty basic information that most of you, I'm sure, already understand the fundamentals of, but we're going to be talking about subsidized loans, unsubsidized loans, and plus loans. The loans get created by the institution. The school creates the loan, creates a loan file using their student information system, or manually. I suppose if you're a really small school, you could go out to COD and create the loan origination file, but typically you're creating loan files in batch after the student has been packaged for their loan eligibility and has accepted the loan. And then you're going to send that loan file up to COD, which is the Common Origination and Disbursement System. And COD will verify that loan, establish it as an originated loan, which means that the loan now exists. And then that file is going to come back to your school. Your school is going to then be able to authorize that loan to the student as long as all of the loan requirements are met. That's a very brief overview. So we're going to just go through really quick the couple different types of direct loans. So one of the things that I try really hard when I'm counseling students about their federal student loans is I use a lot of this terminology over and over again because I want to drill into their heads the name of what they're doing. So I always say federal direct student loan, federal direct Stafford loan. I'm always throwing that word direct into the description when I'm talking to the student about the type of loan that they're taking, because they do get confused. And sometimes it's probably not as common as it was maybe 5 years ago, but you may have students who have already taken loans that have not taken direct loans, who have taken the older version of the federal student loan, and they get confused, they don't understand the difference. And sometimes even I give students just a quick lesson on what is a direct loan and how does it work and why is it called a direct loan. And I have found that that is really helpful sometimes when I have students who are at the exit counseling phase and they just don't understand what their loan portfolio is and what it means. So we're going to start from basics and work our way up to that explanation and what I typically say to students when I'm trying to explain to them what their loans are and how they work. So of course, the quintessential, gold standard Stafford direct Stafford loan that we love the most is the subsidized Stafford loan. This is the only loan in the federal direct loan program that is need-based. So only the subsidized loan is the need-based aid. So remember, over the course of our lectures and lessons that we've had over the past couple of days, the cost of attendance minus the EFC is your financial need, right? You can still take direct loans if you don't have any financial need. Everyone is entitled to the direct student loans as long as you're eligible for federal student aid and you meet all the Title IV criteria and you have requested a federal direct student loan, you can take one. The subsidy is what is dependent on your need. So only undergraduate students can get subsidized loans. So I personally haven't originated a subsidized loan in 7 years because I work with a purely grad professional population. But my prior institution was grad and undergrad. So we were originating subsidized loans, of course. So the way that subsidized loans work is the loan is originated and dispersed, and from the point of disbursement, the government, the Department of Education, is subsidizing the interest. So one of the ways that I like to explain this to new borrowers or parents is, you know how you could be like, food stamps, that's a subsidy. The government's paying for it for you. They're subsidizing the cost. Or the Affordable Care Act, that's a subsidy. The government is subsidizing a portion of the cost of healthcare, in certain circumstances. That's what this is. This is just another government subsidy. That's the way that it works. So sometimes once you kind of link that concept of, oh, a subsidy is when the government is assisting you with a cost, because you're demonstrating that you need assistance, you need that financial assistance. Sometimes that helps people remember the difference between the subsidized and the unsubsidized. So just subsidy just means someone's paying it for you. And in this case, the Department of Ed or Department of Treasury, however you want to look at it, is subsidizing the cost of the interest on that loan for the student. The interest is still accruing. The student's just not having to pay or accumulate that interest that's accruing on the loan. The Department of Ed is paying it for them. So all direct loans, the student borrows, they need to be at least half time. They need to be matriculated in a credential seeking program. And once they are no longer half time or have graduated maybe from that program, they get a 6-month grace period in which, in the case of a subsidized loan, during that 6-month grace period, the loan continues to behave like the student is in school. That's how I phrase it to students and parents. So that during the grace period, your subsidized loan is going to continue to behave like you're in school. It's not going to accrue any interest, and it's not going to, there's no payments due. So once that 6-month period ends, then the loan will go into a repayment status. And then you're going to start repaying the loan. And at the same time that the loan goes into the repayment status, the interest starts accruing on the loan at whatever interest rate that loan was established to have when we originated it and dispersed the loan when the student was enrolled. Okay, so that's subsidized loans. Then we have unsubsidized loans. So the unsubsidized loan is that little supplemental loan. So if a student is eligible for Stafford subsidized, they're going to get their subsidized loan first. And then anything up to their annual eligibility, they're going to get from unsubsidized loans. Unsubsidized Stafford loans are not need-based. So you can take them up to your remaining cost of attendance or up to the annual cap for the loan. So most students, I would guess, at most of your institutions have more need or have more room in their cost of attendance after they've taken the subsidized and the unsubsidized loan. So they're gonna be capped at the annual amount that the maximum they can have each academic year. Unsubsidized loans go to undergraduates, graduates, and professional students. And interest starts accruing on unsubsidized loans as soon as they disperse. It does only accrue on the dispersed amount of the loan though. So your subsidized loan and your unsubsidized loans are probably split into two disbursements, probably one in the fall semester and one in the spring semester. So when your fall, the first half of that sub and unsub disperses, for the unsub, that's when the interest starts accruing, just on that first half. And then when the second half disperses at the beginning of the spring semester, then interest will start accruing on the second half of the loan. And interest is going to continue to accrue on those loans until the student graduates, completes their grace period, goes into repayment. It's just going to be accruing interest forever on whatever the principal balance of the loan is until the loan is paid in full. The way that interest accrues on unsubsidized Stafford loans and Grad Plus loans, we'll get to in a minute, is called simple daily interest. So the interest accrues if you multiply the rate of the loan by the total principal. That's how much accrues on the loan in a whole year. So you can divide that by 365, and that can give you how much accrues in a day. We'll get to that in a later slide. Getting a little ahead of myself. Okay, so these also have a grace period of 6 months, works the same exact way as the sub loan, that they're going to keep behaving like the student is in school for that 6-month grace period after school. And then once that period is done, the loan will enter into repayment. Okay. Then we have direct Parent Plus loans. These are also not need-based loans. This is for parents of undergraduate students. The kind of a fun little piece of trivia is PLUS actually stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Student. So it's kind of a fun little thing. We joke sometimes that we say, oh, we have the graduate parent loan for undergraduate. Doesn't make any sense. But when they started the graduate loan program after they phased out other grad loan programs that existed, they made the PLUS loan program work for graduate students, but PLUS originally stood for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Student. So it's a little redundant, but so it's for parents. The Parent Plus loan does have a credit requirement. It's a very simple credit history check. So it's really when the parent requests a plus loan, it's really just checking to see if that borrower has really adverse credit history. So it's looking for things like foreclosures or defaults, things that are in, really, really far behind and the person's in collections on it. So if somebody just doesn't have a great credit score, but they don't really have any adverse credit history otherwise, they are very likely still going to qualify for the Parent Plus loan or the Graduate Plus loan, just as long as they don't have any adverse credit history. The loan disperses the same way as the unsub and the sub Stafford loan. So it disperses directly to the school on whatever your disbursement day is. Could be your first day of enrollment for the term, it could be a little before. So it's going to disperse, and just like the unsub Stafford loan, as soon as this loan disperses, it starts accruing interest. What's different from the Stafford loan is because this loan is borrowed by not the student, it is not automatically in an in-school deferment status. So with the Stafford loans, the assumption is this student is taking these loans because they are in school. But with the Parent Plus loan, the assumption is this parent is taking this loan because their student is in school and they cannot fully fund the cost of education out of pocket, but the parent is not in school. So Parent Plus loans begin repayment 60 days after the final disbursement of the loan. So let's say you have a Parent Plus loan that has 2 disbursements. The first one happens in August and the second one happens in January. Around March, 60 days after that second disbursement, the Parent Plus loan is going to start repayment. So there's no grace period. that is the grace period if you want to think about it that way. But repayment is going to begin. Now, Parent Plus loans can be deferred, but they do have to request that deferment. So I would recommend, if you have a parent who you know is already has in their head or is already saying to you that they are not going to be paying that loan back while their student is in school, you could be proactive with that parent and you remind them that they are going to have to request an in-school deferment. Maybe you could even, proactively reach out to all of your Parent Plus loan borrowers, using your student information system to remind them that if they want to have that loan deferred, that they have to make a specific request for that from the loan servicer. Okay.
Grace, I think that they can do that on their loan application. Is anybody? I'm not.
Yeah, I remember that. Thank you, Melissa. It's been so
I'm
long
not
since I've done a
100%.
Parent Plus loan. Yeah, you can request it when you request a Parent Plus loan. That's true.
Right. Yeah. So you really want to do it before, they apply. So when you're counseling them about applying, you'd want to indicate at that time, hey, when you do your application, there's a place on there that you can check to have that loan deferred. And then that'll make it a lot simpler for you rather than having to go back out and contact the lender after you secure the loan.
Great. Thank you for reminding me of that. I totally forgot.
My pleasure. That's why I'm here.
So with Graduate Plus loans, what I suggest is to less compare the Grad Plus to the Parent Plus and more compare it to the unsubsidized Stafford loan. It behaves much more similarly to the unsubsidized Stafford loan than the Parent Plus loan, but how you get the loan is the same operation. So the Grad Plus loan is not a need-based loan. Any graduate student can request this loan. I mean, you could have a graduate student who's attending, let's say, medical school. They could have an $80,000 EFC and no financial need, and they can still take the Graduate Plus loan for their entire cost of attendance for their program. It's not a need-based loan, it's an entitlement. So it's for graduate or professional students only. It's meant to supplement the unsubsidized Stafford loan. And the same credit requirements are for the Grad Plus as the Parent Plus. So really they're just looking for adverse credit history. And then, most graduate students are approved for the Graduate Plus loan because most graduate students the thing I always say is you haven't had a chance to screw up your credit yet. So you're probably going to be eligible for the Graduate Plus loan. Interest does start accruing as soon as the loan is dispersed, but one of the differences between Grad Plus and Parent Plus is Grad Plus loans are automatically deferred. So while the student is in school, Graduate Plus loans do not go into repayment. So there's none of that 60 days after the second disbursement thing with Grad Plus loans. Okay, I don't remember if I get to the end of the loans and we didn't talk about endorsers. I don't remember if I have that in here or not, but I do want to talk about it. Okay, so just to show you how the interest rates work, the other thing that is really important to understand about all of direct loans is they all have origination fees. This is a little hard sometimes for students to understand, especially with the plus loans. Sometimes with the Stafford loan, I think since the origination fee is only 1%, it's a little over 1%, they don't notice it so much. But what an origination fee is when every time the loan disperses, the Department of Education just takes that little fee right off the top and keeps it. The student has borrowed that money and they are going to have to pay it back as part of their principal balance. But the Department of Education scoops it off the top. So sometimes I don't love to refer to it as a tax, but sometimes when students don't understand what's going on, I kind of explain to it like sales tax, and then they understand what it means. I say it's kind of like sales tax where, you're going in the store and you're buying something, but you have to pay the tax right then and there in order to take the thing out of the store. And sometimes that helps them understand. So that's a good analogy. So basically, if you refer to it as a tax, I think that riles people up a little bit more too, to kind of maybe help them feel motivated to, go reach out to our legislators and tell them that these origination fees are ridiculous and students shouldn't be charged them. But it's fine. So it's a little over 1% on the Stafford loans. That rate is good through October 2022. And it's about 4.25% for Graduate Plus loans. So 4.25% doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot when you are taking a Graduate Plus loan, let's say, or a Parent Plus loan for the entire remaining cost of attendance for your student's program or your program. You might be taking a $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 Graduate Plus loan if you are attending a medical school program. So it's pretty substantial, even though 4% doesn't sound like a lot. So our students they do get confused about it sometimes because they see that gross amount that they're borrowing, and then they see the amount that actually dispersed onto their account, and it's a different amount and they get confused. So I'm sure you've come across that already. Is the Grad Plus loan in the student's name or the parent's name? The Grad Plus loan is in the student's name. So there are no parents involved with, once you are a grad professional student, financial aid is no longer, your parents no longer have anything to do with your federal student loans once you are a graduate professional student. You may have a school, you may be a school who requires parent information, like on the FAFSA, but that's supplementary information that you're using for institutional aid. You do not use any parent information for graduate professional students. So, for example, like at our institution, we require parent information on the FAFSA. We are all grad professionals here. We require parent information on the FAFSA if you are younger than 27. And we require that only for need-based aid from the institution. So if the student doesn't put parent information, that's totally fine. They're still going to have a federal EFC. They're still going to be eligible for federal student loans and federal aid like work study. And we're going to process those pieces of aid for them. But we are not going to review them for institutional need-based aid because we don't have enough data in order to determine if they're eligible. So that's just how we do it. Some other grad schools also do it that way. Some grad schools just have a supplementary application for parents to complete. But a lot of graduate schools just use the FAFSA as a vehicle to collect the parent information, but then they only use the parent information when we're calculating our institutional methodology for need. That was a long answer to that question, but it's good to like process why. But Grad Plus loans are for students. They are not for parents. This is just for your reference. These are the interest rates for all of the direct loan programs for this upcoming academic year that's about to start in a couple days. So there we go. Last year we had really extremely low rates. Maybe in the chat, does anybody know why the rates were so low last year? I will explain it in a minute, or maybe if somebody wants to come on and say it. Does anybody know why the interest rates dropped so much from the 1920 academic year to the 2021 academic year?
Because of COVID-19.
Because of COVID-19. Good. I don't know who that was who said it, but yeah, exactly. Yeah. So each May, the Department of Education sets the interest rates for the federal student loans for the upcoming academic year. They use the T-note, the 10-year treasury note. They look at that, they reference it on a certain day every year, and then they add an index. So last year, it just happened to be in May of 2020, that 10-year treasury note was really, really low interest rate. And when they added the index, even with the index, the interest rates were extremely low. So this year they're still fairly low. We're still pretty happy with where they are for the graduate loans. But as you see, the undergraduate Stafford loans are always the lowest interest rate. So we've got 3.73, which is really competitive. You are not going to get a private student loan for that low of a rate. And these are fixed interest rates, which just means that once the loan is originated and dispersed, that is always going to be the interest rate of that particular loan. It is never going to change. So, and as you see, the graduate unsubsidized loan is going to be 528 this year, and the plus loan is going to be 628 for parents and graduate students. They're all fixed rate loans. So you can kind of predict it a little bit when you're getting maybe even in the months of April heading into May. You can kind of look at that 10-year Treasury note on the index on the Department of Treasury website. And you can kind of be like, you could be fancy and make a guess on what you think the rate's going to be with an educated guess. And you can get pretty darn close to giving a good prediction of what you think those rates are going to be. Okay. I touched on this slightly, but I'm going to kind of go a little more in depth now about how do students apply for direct loans. Obviously, they need to do their FAFSA. That is always step number one when, applying for federal student aid. The school is going to receive that FAFSA and create a financial aid package. So we already talked about that earlier in the week. The school determines how much direct loan a student is eligible for. We then inform the student, right, through the financial aid package awarding process. We're going to tell the student, hey, you're eligible for this amount of direct loan. How much do you want? We're going to offer it to them. Then the student is going to accept that aid offer. And then the school can go ahead and start the process of creating the loan or originating the loan. When the school sends the origination file to COD, it's going to match, hopefully, with a master promissory note file that the student has already done. So the prom note is the contract for the loan. Students would, hopefully in your student information system, you have things set up in a way where as soon as the student accepts the loan, they are then prompted. They now have a new requirement on their financial aid that says, okay, now you have to do the promissory note for the loan and the entrance counseling for the loan. Otherwise, sometimes students, depending on the type of student you have, they might preemptively go out to studentaid.gov and do that master promissory note and entrance counseling ahead of time, which is also okay. So when that loan goes up, it's going to match with the master promissory note, which we also call an MPN. There we are with our acronyms. And it'll match with the loan counseling, which is their entrance counseling that they're going to complete the first time that they take a loan. And then that will match and it'll come back into your system and the loan will be good to go. Students can do a master promissory note paper or electronically. I would expect that most students are doing them electronically. I don't think we want students doing paper MPNs, but they would be going out to studentaid.gov and completing the correct prom note. So here we also call it a prom note. So we're calling it a master promissory note, calling it an MPN, and sometimes we call it a prom note. Just depends on who you're talking to. I don't think I'd call it a prom note to a student, but I might call it a prom note to you guys. So all these different things all mean the same thing. So you can have promissory notes be good for only 1 year, or they can be good for multiple years. That's typically what schools opt into. So typically a master promissory note gets created, gets signed by the student electronically. Once a loan links to a promissory note, that promissory note is now good to go for 10 years. It's an open note. So if you think about it, if you think about it, the prom note itself doesn't actually have the loan amounts on it like it normally would. Like if you go and you borrow, let's say you're going to go buy a new car and you're going to sign, you're going to get a loan for that car. The promissory note that you sign is going to have the amount of loan on it that you're taking, that you're borrowing, that you promise to pay back. Federal promissory notes for the Stafford loan and the Grad Plus loan, they don't have an amount on them. They're open-ended prom notes. So basically it just means that, hey, I understand that I'm opting into the federal student loan program. I understand the loans and how they work. And I understand that I do have to pay this loan back. And that's basically what the prom note says. So the students sign that, it's open, it's good to go. As soon as a loan is linked to it and you have that first disbursement, that prom note is good for 10 years. If the student signs the prom note and never gets a loan, the promissory note will expire in 1 year. So sometimes that throws people off. The student will say, oh, well, I thought I did this last year. And you'll say, oh yeah, you did it, but you didn't end up taking your Stafford loan last year. So you actually have to go out and do this again because it's already expired. And COD will show you that it's expired. And in your student information system, you should also, when you load these prom note files into your system as well. So you should be able to find in your student information system as well where these prom note files are. So you can also review them. You don't have to go out to COD. You should be able to just look in your whatever system you're using. Like, for example, if you're a banner school, you would go to RLAD, RLAD MPN, and you can look at the actual MPN. Okay. This is how students complete that prom note. So this is studentaid.gov. They go out here and they select that they are about to be in school, or maybe they're already in school and they just haven't taken a loan yet. And they click this complete a loan agreement. We also word it this way to our students on our instructions to our students about doing, completing their master promissory note. We call it this. We say, go out to studentaid.gov and click complete a loan agreement. I don't know why we have to call it 20 different things, but here it is. Now it's called a loan agreement. This is the master promissory note. This is how students complete that. Okay. All right. So that was everything about the Stafford loans and how to be eligible and how to receive them. Now we're going to talk a little bit about PLUS. So PLUS eligibility is also related to the FAFSA. PLUS loans are not necessarily going to be offered to a student on their financial aid package. Some schools do that. And I do know that some schools do offer Parent PLUS loans as well on the financial aid package. We don't do that. What we do is we only offer the Stafford loan because the Graduate Plus loan does require a supplemental application. So the FAFSA is the initial application. That's how we know if the student or the parent, how much the student or the parent is eligible for, or if they are eligible based on their, based on the student's federal student aid eligibility and their eligibility for Title IV. And then with graduate students, the student is also required to take their Stafford loan before they take their PLUS loan. So they need to be offered their Stafford loan and they need to accept it for the maximum amount, the annual maximum amount for that loan offer before we can originate a PLUS loan. And that's just to protect the student, because the unsubsidized Stafford loan is better than the PLUS loan. It's a whole point cheaper. So the interest rate is lower, the origination fee is lower, and we want to make sure that our students are taking the lower interest rate loan before they take that PLUS loan. So you may have a way to manage that at your institution, or you may not even know that there's already a way that that's being managed at your institution. But what we do is we have our system set up in a way that plus loans will not create in our system unless that Stafford loan is in an accepted status. It won't even, it'll be like the student's not eligible for plus, even if they have room in their cost of attendance. So you cannot give a student a plus loan if they have not already taken their maximum unsub eligibility for the same year. The same thing with the master promissory note. Once a loan is linked to the MPN, it's good for 10 years. If a loan never gets linked to a plus MPN, let's say a parent, maybe they're thinking about it, maybe they're gonna take a plus loan, they request it, they do the MPN, but then they decide, oh, they didn't need to take it. And maybe the student's second year in school, they do need to take a plus loan, and they're giving you a hard time saying, no, I already did the MPN. You can say, yes, but it's expired because you did it more than a year ago. So that's just like a little quirky thing that happens sometimes. So this is how parents apply for Parent Plus loans. I do know that some schools also have internal applications for plus loans.
Grace, there's a good question in the chat.
Oh yeah.
About before you go on to the applying for the plus.
No, they need to borrow it. So Hannah, that's a great question. So yeah, I mean, we need to inform them what they're eligible for, and then we really should be enforcing that they take their Stafford loan before we originate a graduate plus loan. That's our interpretation and how our school handles it. We will not create a plus loan if the student has not accepted their full Stafford for the year. And that's my understanding of the rule. You just don't, that's a disservice to the student. So you really need to be thinking about it that way as well. So you really don't want to be creating a loan for a student where you could have created a better loan to cover that same cost.
I don't know if this helps because happens with undergrads. Like the undergrads don't have to take their loans, but a parent could take a plus loan.
Right.
This
right.
is just for your graduate students that you're talking about.
Yes, Hannah, correct. This is only for graduate students. This is for the graduate plus loan. I'm sorry if I didn't really make that clear. So yeah, a parent can take a parent plus loan and the student could opt out of their Stafford loan. Now, once again, that's a counseling situation where you would really want to have that conversation with your student and the parents about why they maybe don't want to do that. Especially if the student's eligible for subsidized loan, you would definitely want to encourage them to take that subsidized loan first, at least, before the parents start borrowing from Plus. And honestly, you would want to encourage them to take the unsubsidized loan too. But yes, they would have the right to opt out of taking the student taking any loan, and the parent could take the loan. The plus loan, but the parent can't take Stafford loan. The student, is the only one that can borrow the Stafford loan. But with graduate plus loan, remember when I said earlier, kind of think more about graduate plus loan as just more unsub, right? It's not Stafford, but on the grad professional level, it's more like, okay, you're going to get your unsub and then you're going to get more unsub from the grad plus. That's not Parent Plus. That's not how it works on that side. It's two totally different loans, two totally different, people paying them back. But with graduate students, it's just more loan that one student is still going to be managing in repayment. So this is how parents come out and request the plus loan on the studentaid.gov website. Your school may have a supplementary application. They may handle that in a couple different ways. So if your institution does, maybe let's do a show of hands, or just say like I do in the chat, if your school does an institutional application for plus or for Parent Plus or Grad Plus. Does anybody do institutional loan request? No. Yes, only for plus denials. Okay, so we have at least one school that does an institutional loan request. So the way that would work is you're basically asking the student, if they're a graduate student, or asking the parent to authorize that you create that loan on their behalf. And then you can go ahead and create that loan in your system, and it'll go up to COD, and that will prompt the credit check on the loan, and the loan will get created. So the school can initiate the creation of the loan. The student or parent can also initiate the creation of the loan by going out to studentaid.gov. Another option is schools could also have a policy where they preemptively run the credit check. So, you could go out to COD and actually run the credit check on the PLUS loan for the parent or the student. You could see first whether it's denied or approved. And if it's approved, then you would go ahead and originate the loan. Some schools do it that way, but the credit check will happen when the origination file gets to COD. Great. Okay, this is how graduate students request the Graduate Plus loan. Same thing, they're coming out to studentaid.gov and requesting that. So when a student or parent requests a PLUS loan, a credit check is run immediately. They pretty much get their credit answer. I think it's immediate. It's like right away. They're going to know if they're approved or denied for the loan. I would say most graduate students are approved. Typically, like I already said, they haven't had a chance yet to mess up their credit too severely. So most of the time they don't have any adverse credit history. That credit check is then good for 180 days, which is a pretty long time. So students or parents can go out to COD or go out to studentaid.gov in advance and request a parent loan if they want, to see if they'll be approved. But honestly, we don't necessarily want them to do that until they know for sure where their student is going to school, or for grad students where they're going to school, because they don't necessarily know how much to request. On the request though, for the loan, they don't actually need to put an amount, which is really interesting. They can just put maximum. So they can request the loan for just the maximum amount. And what that would be is just whatever's left to cover the entire cost of attendance. When that loan gets created, that's the amount that the loan would be authorized for. Okay, so if somebody applies for a PLUS loan and they are denied because they do have adverse credit history, there's a couple things that they can do. They can appeal that item. So COD or federal student aid can inform the parent or student what that adverse item is. And sometimes it's something really simple and something that they can resolve fairly quickly. Like maybe it's an unpaid medical bill. We've seen that. I've seen that lots of times, where the student or the parent can actually go pay that medical bill, and then inform that it's been resolved, and then the credit history can be the credit can be approved. They can appeal, based on wrong information or so usually, like with a grad student, if they get their credit denied, we usually tell them to appeal right away, just to see if their appeal can be approved, before we send them out to find an endorser. Because the endorsement process is a little bit tricky. It's time consuming and the steps are very particular, and sometimes students have a hard time with it. It's also hard because they might not want to find an endorser. So nobody really wants to do that. Nobody wants to have to go out to a family member and say, I got denied for the PLUS loan for my kid for college. Can you co-sign it with me? So if they can get the appeal done and that without doing an endorsement process, that's helpful. But anyway, so basically once the loan file exists, it has an ID, and that gets, the endorser would go on to studentaid.gov and endorse the loan, which is basically the same as co-signing. It's very similar. And then that loan would have an endorser, which is someone who's saying, okay, use my credit history instead of this person's credit history in order to see if I'm eligible for them to have the loan. And then if the endorsement process works, then the loan can get created. Then there's some additional counseling that the borrower needs to do. So they would then need to do, I guess it's just called plus counseling on studentaid.gov. And that's just about their credit and stuff. So it's a secondary requirement. And a new master promissory note needs to be signed. Even if like that, let's say it's a second year and that parent took a plus loan last year and they didn't have an endorser issue and now they had to have it endorsed, they need a new MPN. So every endorsed loan needs its own MPN. So that's a tricky thing sometimes that we forget. Same for Graduate Plus. So if a graduate student is needing an endorser to get approved, they need to sign a new master promissory note for that new endorsed loan. And next year when they get their loan endorsed again, they're going to have to sign another master promissory note. Because once a master promissory is linked to an endorsed loan, it's no good anymore. Now it's expired and it can't be linked with any other loans. Okay, so this is just a little bit about overriding the dependency status or the amount of Stafford loan that a student's eligible for. Schools can use professional judgment to determine that a student should be awarded independent level of Stafford loan. Honestly, I would start with seeing if a parent would be denied on the plus before going through a whole PJ process to get some additional Stafford eligibility for a student. Because another thing that can result from a parent being denied on the plus loan is the student can then take a little bit more from annual limits from their Stafford loan. So it kind of makes them, it doesn't make them independent, but it does make them eligible for the independent level of the Stafford loan for that academic year, for that aid year. So that's a way around it as well. But this would be completing a PJ to consider the student independent, and then you could also give them the independent level of the Stafford loan. So I'm going to show you the Stafford levels in a little bit. Okay, so we're gonna go through a couple examples about how to calculate the amount of loan that a student is eligible for. We talked a little bit about this in packaging, but not a lot. So we're just gonna go through what data measures are used when figuring out how much loan a student can have. So the four big items that go into figuring out how much loan a student's eligible for is the period on which the loan is getting created. So maybe that's the aid year, the total cost of attendance for that period, and of course the EFC, which we need in order to figure out if the student has financial need or not, and the other financial aid that the student is eligible for, the EFA, that's your estimated financial assistance. So loan period is the period of enrollment to which the loan applies. So typically that's going to be your academic year, but sometimes it's not. Maybe sometimes you're going to create a term only loan. Maybe you have a student who's enrolled in the fall and the spring, but they didn't need the loan in the fall. And now they're in the spring semester and they only need it for the spring. So you could create a spring only loan and that would be your loan period. So during the loan period, there's minimum and maximum amounts of loans that you could establish for the student. And you would also be looking at the cost of attendance and the EFC and the EFA for that loan period when you're creating the loan. This is just a really nice illustration of some good examples of standard terms. most of us, I think yesterday we determined that everyone here is a standard term. Nobody's non-standard or clock hour or anything weird here. I will say from experience, we used to be non-standard and it was a little tricky. We were non-standard substantially equal, but then when the regulations changed, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, and they gave standard terms a little bit more flexibility with how many weeks we could be, we became eligible to be just a standard term. We're basically this trimester example at PCOM. When I explain it to students, I actually say that we're quarters, even though we're not quarters when it comes to processing federal student aid, because our students go to school year round. Every semester is 3 months. So this is what we are. We live in this zone right here. You probably live in this semester 1 and 2 zone, and then maybe you have a summer term that maybe has modules in it. So I'm going to show you that example. So we saw this, I think, already once or twice, but just to look at it, this is probably what most of you are, where you have a standard fall and spring semester that are, back to this slide, 14 to 21 weeks each. And then you have your summer term, which is probably also somewhere between 14 and 21 weeks, but maybe within it has what we call modules, or like, you know, your summer semester, your summer sessions, or whatever your school calls it. Summer can be in the beginning or the end. Is having summer in the equation where BBAY comes into play? Not necessarily. Is anybody a BBAY school? Borrower-based academic year? Yes, Hannah is. Yes, Jasper is. Ooh, we have a couple borrower-based schools. That's exciting. Yeah, cool. Okay. So yeah, so I'm mostly talking about standard academic years. Borrower-based academic year is a little different because you're starting your academic year defined by the borrower. Like when they start borrowing is the start of their year. Oh boy, I haven't done borrower-based in a long time. So maybe if there's anybody who's in faculty that's a BBAY. No. Okay. I will say a couple years ago, we were considering switching to BBAY, and I did a ton of research and went to a lot of really good sessions at FSA. So the FSA conference is free, right? It's free to attend. I mean, your institution may not have budget to send you to attend the conference, but what's great about the FSA conference is all of the sessions are recorded. So you can view all of those federal student aid conference sessions anytime if you go out to their conference website. I think everything, if you go to FSA Partners, you're going to find all of those resources there. That's a really good place to go when you're trying to understand academic years, terms, you know, different ways that you can set up your system, set up your calendar. But yes. Okay, and then non-standard is anything other than what we just talked about. So anything other than, you know, whether you have a semester, trimester, or a quarter system, if you don't fit into any of these, then you are going to be non-standard. And then you're going to be doing all sorts of stuff. And you may, you know, you may be non-standard, or you may be non-term, which is really scary. I don't ever want to work anywhere that's non-term. But so we like our little, the definitions and the understanding of the terms makes things easier. Okay. So we already saw this a couple times, but just to reiterate, these are really core principles that everybody should, you know, just inherently understand all the time. So to determine whether or not there is financial need, of course, we're taking our total cost of attendance and just removing the expected family contribution. That tells us if our student has financial need. When we're figuring out what a student needs for financial aid after, maybe we've determined some things we can give them based on financial need. We're going to take the cost of attendance, subtract the EFC, and then also subtract all of that other financial aid that the student was eligible to receive, probably based on financial need. And then they're going to still potentially have remaining financial need to cover. Or this keyword difference is eligibility or need, right? Then we have loan programs that do not require the student to demonstrate any financial need in order to qualify. So all they would need to be able to demonstrate is eligibility in the academic year. So they still are limited by their COA. Fundamentally, just understand that whatever your school is establishing as the cost of attendance, the student will never be able to get more financial aid than that. That is the maximum amount of financial aid that that student is going to get in that academic year. This is really hard to explain sometimes to graduate students who think that they are going to go out to a private student lender and take a loan, and they're going to be able to just take it, and it's not going to have to fit into that cost of attendance for their program. And then they're surprised when we call them and we say, hi, you have asked us to certify a loan for you don't have any room left in your cost of attendance. You already have your Stafford loan and your Graduate Plus loan. Why are you taking another loan? And they say, oh, well, I need it to pay for XYZ. And we say, well, XYZ are not in your cost of attendance, and you can't take an educational loan for that purpose. You're going to have to go take a personal loan or something else. Or that's when you talk to the student about what's really going on with you financially. Maybe we need to adjust your cost of attendance. Maybe your cost of attendance is different or more. But anyway, everything has to fit. Everything that is a student, any student aid has to fit in this cost of attendance.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So sometimes I don't work with the loans directly. I'm just like the program assistant, but sometimes we have students who try to take like PLUS loans or other private education loans to cover not only their cost of attendance for the current year, but any outstanding balance for the cost of attendance for like a previous year.
Mm-hmm.
Would they go about, was that allowed, or would they have to do a separate educational loan for that?
Yeah, that's definitely not allowed. So, I mean, if you're processing a student loan, you know, within an aid period or within an academic year, it has to fit into that academic year. So some options may include, I know there are some private lenders who allow, you to allow students to borrow for prior term balances. So that would be a situation where if that then fit in their cost of attendance for that prior, it would still have to have fit in their cost of attendance, right? And it depends on your school's policy for private loans. I would say if it's a few weeks after the semester ended and the student still has an unpaid balance from the prior year, they're heading into the next year and they take like a Sally Mae loan or something that allows them to borrow for a prior balance. Probably your school would allow the student to take that loan, and they would do it based on the prior year. If it required school certification, sometimes loans like that don't require school certification, right? And if they don't require school certification, then it doesn't matter. Then it doesn't have to fit in the cost of attendance. Yeah. For graduate students, there are some programs that, there are some loan programs that are specifically for things outside the cost of attendance. So sometimes we do have students who are taking a loan that's meant to be a supplementary student expenses loan. And we do not do a school certification for that, but we often have to do a enrollment certification. So we do have to tell the lender that, yes, in fact, this person is a student, because that's part of the eligibility for the loan. Okay, yeah, definitely, Hannah, thank you. Yeah, it definitely depends on your school's policies on how you authorize or certify past due balance loans. But there are definitely private student loans that let you borrow for a past due balance. You can't do that with federal student aid. You can't. Once the academic year is over, or the loan term, the loan period is done, you can't go back and certify a loan for the academic year that's done. Okay, great question. So for estimated financial assistance, that's that third part. So we're talking about COA, then the EFC, then the EFA. So now we're talking about EFA. So things that fall into EFA are all of these items. But when you're calculating subsidized loan eligibility, you don't count some of these things because so it's really about, I think the best way to think about it is you want to think about this, that things have a certain order. There's an order of operations and how they should be determined whether or not the student is eligible. So none of these things get included in the EFA when you're determining if a student can get subsidized loans. The subsidized loan should be the first thing essentially that you're putting on after Pell. Okay, here's our annual loan limits. You're all probably quite familiar with these numbers, but this is a great one. This is a great thing to have when you're a new aid administrator, taped at your desk, hanging up nearby, because you forget. I would add to this the rates, the interest rates, and the origination fee. I also do I have this little cheat sheet right here for myself. That is how to calculate the net and the net amount of the loan minus the origination fees. So it's just like if a student's trying to figure out how to cover their exact balance with a loan. We do have quite a number of students at our institution who don't like to get refunds. They don't want to borrow more than they need. They only want to borrow exactly what they need to cover their, charges for the term. So we factor that fee right into how much we're telling them, hey, you should borrow X amount because you want to make sure you're borrowing a little extra to account for the fee when it gets taken out of the loan. So that's something I would put with this. So just to quickly fly through this one. For first year students, they can have up to 3,500 subsidized. They can then have that additional 2,000 of unsubsidized. Second year students can have 4,500 subsidized, an additional 2,000 unsubsidized. And then of course, our third and fourth years can have up to 5,500 subsidized and the additional 2,000 unsubsidized. So it's good to just, a good way to remember it is just, it's always an extra 2, right? It's always an extra 2,000 of unsub eligibility, and then just go like 3, 4, 5, 5 in your head. And I don't know, that it's easy to remember after you've done it a couple times too, and after you've explained it to somebody. And then of course, when you get into the higher levels, you are eligible for more loan. Now, the reason why there's nothing listed there for grad professional students and subsidized loans is grad students don't get subsidized loans anymore. They used to. Prior to 2012, grad students did get, or I think it was 2012, grad students got the first 8,500 subsidized, and then the rest was unsub, but they changed that. So all the way to the right column is the amount, the total amount. Like a grad professional student can have up to $20,500 per academic year of unsubsidized Stafford loan. Okay. And then there's additional loan amounts that you can have if you are considered independent as an undergraduate student. So, you can have 3,500 and you have another, you can have another 2,000, making it 5,500 plus another 6,000, making it 11,500. This is also the amount that you get extra if your parent is not approved for Parent Plus in that academic year. So if you have a student and I know we used to do this, and I know a lot of institutions kind of strategically use this as a tool. If you have a student who, they get their financial aid award, their financial aid package, and they have 5,000 or 6,000 of unmet financial need after their whole package is complete, and that's accounting for, their 5,500 of Stafford loan that they're getting. You may say, hey, you can definitely cover that cost either with the Parent Plus loan or with additional Stafford loan if your parent gets denied. So that's an option. And then when they do get, if a student's parent gets denied for the Plus loan, that then adds to their aggregate amount, right? Their aggregate Stafford amount that they're allowed to have, which we're going to talk about here.
Grace, I have a question quick.
Sure.
The extra money, is it an extra 6,000 or is it 6,000 with the 2,000, an extra 4,000 for a Parent Plus denial?
I'm pretty sure it's an extra 6,000, right?
I think
Laura?
it might be 4 actually for the
Yeah.
whole year, and then it's split half and half, 2,000 each semester if you do
So it's
semesters.
6,000 total.
Right.
6,000
Yeah.
total.
Thank you. Also a refresher
Yeah.
for myself because I haven't done it in a long
All
time.
right.
So it would be 9,500. They would become eligible for.
Yes.
10,500 that they would be eligible for total if their parent was denied. And then 5 plus 7. What's that, guys? No, I'm joking. 12,500. It's the same as if they were independent. So it's the same as if they were like a truly independent undergraduate student. Let's say they were 24 and they were going back to undergrad, or they were just starting undergrad. They would be eligible for the 95, 10.5, or 12.5. Okay, thank you. I was thinking that, but then I was like, no, maybe it is that much. Wishful thinking, I suppose. Great. So aggregate loan limits, here we go, just a recap. This is not something you have to commit to memory, but it is a good thing to just have a good understanding of the loan limits. So aggregate just means the total amount of loans the student is going to take through their entire life. We also sometimes call it lifetime limit, aggregate or lifetime limit, just depends on what you're reading. So if you are an undergraduate student, here are your limits. So once you're reaching these aggregate totals, what will happen is the FAFSA will give you a comment code informing you that the student is getting either close to that limit or has reached that limit or has exceeded that limit. So there's like three different levels of warning that happen. If the student is getting close to the limit, it's typically not a big deal and it's not something that you need to resolve. But you do just need to be careful that you aren't causing them with your awarding to go over the limit. So our systems can be, there are definitely features in our systems that help us prevent over awarding when it comes to lifetime aggregate limits. So, the FAFSA information is going to come in and it's going to tell us how much Stafford loan that student has already taken. That's on the FAFSA. That's on our ISAR. So on our institutional data that we get when we get that student's FAFSA record, we're getting this information. So you can use that information to your institution's ability to then make sure that you're not giving them extra loan. Or make sure that you're not the one that's messing them up and putting them over their aggregate limit. During the school year, we also get updates from NSLDS when loans are changed. So sometimes we will get information also pulled into our system that informs us that students are over their limit or have now gone over their limit. You can also, put measures in place internally that allow you to quality check all of this stuff, so that you're not giving a student a loan that they're not eligible for. We do that. So we have like an internal, we allow our system to award the funds based on the aggregate amount that the student has when we receive their FAFSA. But then we also understand that there's always potential for change because the student may have had a disbursement happen after they filed their FAFSA. So maybe that total loan amount is different now than it was when we got that initial FAFSA file. And especially since prior year, because students can file that FAFSA so early that maybe when they file it, they haven't even gotten their spring disbursement yet. So that's a whole half a year of Stafford loan that maybe isn't being accounted for on their aggregate amount when we pull that ISAR record into our system. So what we do is we compare the total loan on the ISAR, the aggregate total, to the total loan that we've created for the loan for the student for the year, and we see if that's over. And we have just like a little internal report that does that. And that informs us if we have students who are potentially now over their aggregate, and then we fix them. The good news is on the graduate professional level, when a student reaches their lifetime aggregate limit for the Stafford loan, they can still take Graduate Plus loan. So these limits are all about the Stafford loan. They are not about the Plus loan. Okay, that's a big important thing that I maybe should have said first, but so these limits are all only about the Stafford loan program. So this is going to track when students are reaching these total amounts for the amount of Stafford loan that they've borrowed. Okay. So yes, look at this big scary number, this 224. We have quite a number of students who have not exceeded, but have met that 224 and are done getting Stafford loan and will never be able to take any more Stafford loan, and they got to take Grad Plus. So that's a big number. All right, for subsidized loan eligibility, we're talking about financial need. So let's look at an example. The example is the next slide, but so we're going to look at, so when it comes to awarding the subsidized loan, we are looking at our cost of attendance. We're going to take away the EFC. We're going to take away the EFA items that belong before that. And then we're going to see how much subsidized loan we can give the student. Then we're going to look at that total amount that we could potentially give the student, and we're going to compare it to the annual loan limit that is imposed upon that student. And we're also going to look at how much loan does the student actually want. And we're going to give them the smallest of those three. So if the student is eligible for $5,500 for their annual limit, but their loan eligibility is only $3,000 because that's all that's left in their financial need, and the student requested $5,000, we can only give the student $3,000 because that's all they're eligible for based on their need. So here's an example. So we've got Sarah's student. She has a cost of attendance of $62,000. She has an expected family contribution of $35,000 when her parents completed the FAFSA with her. This is her EFC. And then she also got $12,000 an annual scholarship from the institution, a merit-based scholarship. So she has $15,000 of remaining financial need for the academic year. So she's eligible for $15,000 of loan, but her annual loan limit is only $3,500. And then she's only requesting 2,500. How much subsidized loan should the school originate? Good. Exactly. The smallest of the three. So the student is saying, I only want 2,500. You're going to originate 2,500. Now, what happens? Follow-up question. What happens in the spring semester when the student said, oh, wait a second, I was eligible for 3,500? What can you do then? Would you be allowed to go back and give the student 3,500? Yes. Yes. But what would you need to do? Does somebody want to talk and explain maybe what they would need to do if that happened? Not too complicated. You would just need to make sure that that's not creating an over award, right? That's all. So you would want to go back and make sure that that additional $1,000 that you're giving to the student fits in their original cost of attendance in their financial need. And you would have to adjust accordingly for the student who's deciding to take that loan. And you probably wouldn't want to originate it if they were not eligible at that point, but in her case, she would be. Okay. Here's the unsub. It's a little bit simpler. So we're just looking at cost of attendance minus the total other financial aid that the student has, including that sub loan. Same rules apply though, when we're talking about, you know, it has to be the smallest amount of the three. Just looking at my time. Here's an example for your unsub loan. So if Samuel has a $62,000 cost of attendance, he is getting $40,000 in other financial aid. Could be any combination of other financial aid, but let's say it's a scholarship. So he has $22,000 left in eligibility. So really 22,000 is his general loan eligibility that he has. He can only have 7,500 in his annual limit from his unsubsidized loan. Let's say he's not eligible for subsidy at all. He gets all unsubsidized. And he wants 14,500. How much are we going to give him? Good. Exactly. Exactly. So we're going to give him 7,500 because that is the smallest of the three. That is what he's eligible for, just the 7,500. That's his annual limit. He can't have more than that. Same goes for the Graduate Plus loan. It works exactly the same way as the unsubsidized Stafford loan. The only thing that's different is you got to put the Stafford loan first. So here's Shayna. Her EFC is 82,000. I'm sorry, her cost of attendance is 82,000. She's getting a $5,000 need-based scholarship from her school. So she still has 77,000 of remaining eligibility. She's being offered her $20,500 unsubsidized Stafford loan. That's the maximum amount she can have. And she has 56,500 left in loan eligibility. She wants 65,000. How much Graduate Plus loan is the school going to originate? Graduate Plus loan. You got it. Yes, very good. Exactly. So the school's going to originate the 56,500 because that is the maximum remaining amount that is available in her cost of attendance. So that 82, this 82 is her max amount of financial aid. As a grad student, None of it is need-based aid from the federal government. So she can have all of that in loans if she wants. Okay. So you have to prorate loans when you have students enrolled in less than an academic year. I'm not going to go through all these questions because I don't want to stretch us too long. And I want to get to the loan repayment stuff. But let me move to the next one because, oh, actually, no. Let's do number 2. If the program length is an academic year or longer, is the student's remaining period of enrollment, hold on, let me think. Determine the annual loan limit for programs or remaining periods of enrollment shorter than an academic year. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. What if we have a student who transfers into your institution and they're starting in the spring semester, and you want to give them Stafford loan? What is the first thing that you are going to do? You are going to think about them in the terms of the annual amount of the loan and how much of that annual amount are they going to be enrolled at your institution. And you also need to take into account how much loan they already borrowed in that academic year from their prior institution. And transfer monitoring is one way to manage that. But really, if you're having a transfer student, you know that they're a transfer student. So you should probably be monitoring it that way as well, in the fact that you know that they're transferring. But anyway, long story short, you're really just going to be prorating the loan based on the percentage of the academic year. And if you're a semester school, you know, you have a half and half situation. Well, we also have SULA, but we don't necessarily need to talk about that so much today because we're not having to do SULA anymore. SULA is just about limiting to that 150%, but we had a beautiful Federal Register a few days ago get published and tell us there's a couple things we no longer need to do. This is something they implemented a couple years ago anyway, so it's kind of nice not to have to do it. All right. Ooh, okay, so I breezed through a few things, but I think I hit the most important things that are most applicable to everyone regarding creating the loans, understanding how students are eligible, how to calculate what they're eligible for. We're going to head into some loan repayment stuff now. I'm going to try to go fairly quick through these because we only have about 10 minutes. That's all right. Okay. In addition to that master promissory note, before a student can take a loan, they need to do entrance counseling. The entrance counseling gives them an electronic overview of all of the components of the loan and how loans work and how interest works, and gives them a little peek into the future of repayment. It also tells them how much total loan they've taken. So if they've been a prior borrower, it's going to show them their current loan amounts as well. Students only need to do this one time for their academic program, like for their whole program. You can encourage students to do this each academic year if you want them to, but you can't require them. So once they've done the entrance counseling, their entrance counseling is good for that whole level. So like once they do entrance counseling for undergrad, they're good for undergrad. They do have to do entrance counseling again when they get to graduate school, if they are taking Graduate Plus loans. If they get to graduate school and they're only taking the unsubsidized loan, they actually don't need to do entrance counseling again, because the entrance counseling covers the subsidized and the unsubsidized Stafford loans. But if they take Grad Plus loans, they need to do entrance counseling again, and they need to tell it that they're a grad student when they do it. With grad students, they're basically getting a lot of the same information, but they are getting additional information about their prior loan borrowing, which is helpful sometimes because it helps them understand like where they already are with how much loans they already have. When plus loans are, I touched on this very briefly, but when plus loans are denied, and then they have to have an endorsement process or an appeal process, there is an additional counseling that the student or the parent needs to complete. And it's just additional information about credit and repayment and helping them really understand the loan. I guess it's a mitigation effort because those borrowers are seen as a higher risk to the Department of Ed because they're having credit issues already. Yeah. Then we've got exit counseling. So I feel like exit counseling is one of those topics that often kind of gets breezed over. By the time you are working with students who are graduating from your school, they kind of just get shuffled out the door and you never think about them again. And you kind of tell them like, oh, you need to talk to your loan servicer if you have questions about these things. But I think that's, you really should have a good understanding of after the fact what these loans do and how these loans behave for the student. Our responsibility as aid administrators is to make sure the student understands that they need to do exit counseling and how they do it. We have to tell them within 30 days of their graduation date that they need to complete their exit counseling. And really the only regulatory requirement we have is to tell them when, if you are asked like to demonstrate that you have completed the exit counseling requirement for students, all you have to demonstrate is that the student was informed that they needed to do their exit counseling and given their instructions on how to do it online. I don't think that's enough personally. So, I think at your institution, you should be implementing some additional exit counseling measures. You could be doing in-person sessions, you could be making one-on-one appointments available with counselors who are comfortable talking to students about their loans and their loan repayment. You could be providing the paper exit counseling guide to students when they graduate, encouraging them to do more than just the online exit counseling. What we do here is we pretty much do exit counseling one-on-one with almost all of our medical students, specifically our med students. It's about 85% of our med students come in for individual exit counseling. But we're talking about students who have on average $250,000 to $300,000 of federal student loan debt by the time they finish medical school. So it's a very, very serious thing that we have caused them to have. And so we see that as a really important, really important service to give them to make sure that they know exactly what they need to do to be in a good repayment status. When they do the online counseling, they're going to go through all of this good stuff. I would highly recommend, especially if you don't have student loans, which is probably almost none of us. Most of us, I think, under the age of 40 here, probably all either took student loans or are still paying back the student loans that we took. So we can commiserate. And we have done exit counseling before, but I would recommend you do the entrance and exit counseling on studentaid.gov. It's not going to hurt you. I also really recommend you make a student FSA ID as if you are a student. If you don't have one already, because you were a borrower at one point. If you were, then of course use your own FSA ID that you used to use or that you've used for grad school. But I recommend you make one and you do the entrance and the exit counseling annually if you have time. They don't take very long to do. Honestly, you could file a FAFSA too. You're allowed to do all these things. It's not going to hurt you.
If you don't list a school code, if you don't list a school code, the information won't go anywhere. So like, you could do a FAFSA without sending it to your school or something like that. So.
Yeah. So I've done that. I did that when I started working in grad aid because I had never filed a FAFSA as a graduate student before. And I wanted to see, what the steps were. We do that. We actually do it every year. Someone on our staff files a FAFSA and takes screenshots and stuff so that we have resources for our students. So pretend you're a student, go through it from their point of view. Sometimes that's really helpful. Okay. In repayment, we've got a couple different types of deferments that students are eligible for. You don't have to know all of these by heart, but do know that there's lots of deferment options. I will say though, that if a graduated student calls us and is talking to us about issues they're having in repaying their loans, the very first thing I start talking to them about is income-driven repayment. I do not jump to deferment and forbearance. I jump to, okay, what type of repayment plan are you in? Maybe you just need a cheaper repayment plan. So there are deferments. Deferments are the best, right? Because a deferment, when a student is in deferment, they go back into the loan behaving like they were a student. So like if it's a subsidized loan, it's going to be subsidized while they're in deferment. Forbearance is not the best, the least best, I think, of three options. Whether you have someone in a hardship, are they getting into an income-driven plan? Best. Deferring, second best. Forbearing, definitely third best. So when you're in forbearance, that means that you're probably having some kind of financial hardship, or maybe there's some administrative reason why you're in forbearance. That would be something like maybe your loan is being consolidated, and in that period, it'll be in a forbearance status, so you're not making payments on it. But during forbearance, your loans accrue interest. And at the end of a forbearance status, your unpaid interest becomes principal balance.
I'm going to give you a little bit of history. Actually, the back end loan servicing information used to be in the FSA handbook. In fact, I know you'll probably find this hard to believe, but I actually still have the last one that was like either 1999 or 1998. And then after that, they took loan repayment out of the handbook. So it kind of tells you my age there. Although I'm so thankful I'm in my 50s, I don't know what to do. So there you go. Shout out for 50s. When you get there, it'll be a good time. Don't worry. But it used to have a lot of good information. We used to do a lot more back then with loan repayment and stuff. It's just become so big, and with all the loan programs and things changed. So a lot of this information though is available out on that FSA website, for the students. You can actually search under that and get information about forbearances. And I often share that with our students as well. So really good job, Grace. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, loans can be discharged for certain reasons. Oftentimes the school does get involved in discharges. So you will eventually have your first death discharge at some point. You'll have maybe a student or an alum who has passed, and you kind of sometimes we assist parents or spouses through that process. We often assist if we can in any way possible. If there's something that I can do instead of having the parent do it, then I'm going to do it.
We do the same thing. Like a lot of times we'll send the death certificate on to the servicer for the family. So yeah, very good. Thank you.
Another interesting thing is the different federal loan servicers each have different tasks. So like discharge, I think is Nelnet. I think Nelnet does all of the discharging. So if you do have a situation, you can call the loan servicer and talk to them about what to do. And we have, of course, loan forgiveness opportunities, which some of us may be pursuing. So
financial aid actually does qualify for the public service loan forgiveness if you're at the right kind of institution. So for those of you that are in repayment on loans, it may very well be worth your while. I know one of the ladies that works in us, she works actually in advising. She's been pursuing the public service loan forgiveness through the university. Well, through AES actually, or whatever, but so that is available. Financial aid might qualify depending on the school you work at.
Yeah, if you work at a nonprofit institution and you're full-time, it's very likely that you qualify for public service loan forgiveness. You may be talking to students about consolidating their loans. I'm trying to breeze through real quick here because I went too long with my other parts.
That's okay.
Repayment plan options. I do want to really show you guys the couple of repayment plans because it feels super daunting and overwhelming, but it's not too complicated. But basically what happens is a student graduates, they're going to complete their exit counseling. And during exit counseling, they're going to kind of like preliminarily select a repayment plan. It's not set in stone. A lot of them freak out when they're doing the exit counseling because they're like, oh no, how do I know what repayment plan I want right now? Like, I'm not thinking about this yet. And that's okay. They can pick whatever repayment plan they want when they're doing their exit counseling. But maybe about a month or so before their grace period is ending, they should really know if they need to do a different kind of repayment plan than standard, because the standard repayment plan is the 10-year repayment term. They're going to pay the same amount every single month for 10 years, and the loan's going to be paid in full. Then there's a graduated repayment option where you pay less at the beginning, and every couple years, the monthly payment increases and you still pay it off in 10 years. You can extend your repayment for a very long time, up to like 25 to 30 years, depending on the type of loans you have. Or you can do an income-driven repayment option. And these are all for direct loans. So the income-driven repayment plans are what you would want to be pursuing if you were pursuing any kind of loan forgiveness. For direct loans, there's a couple different ones. The main two that we are talking to students about in 2021 is the revised pay-as-you-earn repayment plan and the pay-as-you-earn. Most students who are graduating right now, they're eligible for either of these. If you have parent plus loan borrowers, they are not. They can only do income contingent repayment, but there is an income-driven option for parent loan borrowers. If you have students, you probably don't, who still have family federal education loans, which are from prior to the direct loan program, they can only do other certain types of income-driven repayment plans, or they can consolidate their FFEL loans, make them a direct loan, and then become eligible to do better repayment options. But long story short, I mean, I will say that it is really helpful to know at least a little about the repayment plans, so that when you do get questions from students, you don't feel blindsided. I will say Federal Student Aid, like I said before, with their conference, they do a lot of really excellent sessions about loan repayment and how the different plans work. So if you're curious, I would start there. There's always a really good session about income-driven repayment, how those payments are calculated. So that's where I would go first, and come to me second, to be honest, because I've been doing extensive, detailed loan repayment counseling this whole time I've been here. And I have come across every single variation of situation that you could come across when you are having students figure out which repayment plan to choose. So if you have some wacky situation, feel free to send me an email and say, hey, have you ever come across this? And the answer is probably, yeah, last week, because we got some weird, we have some really unique situations with adult graduate students. But yeah, so.
Thank you very much, Grace, because I'm sure you do have a lot of expertise, you know, with the grad students, because that is pretty much loans are loans. And as I mentioned, that I think it's SFA, like where we send the students, the Federal Student Aid site also has some good sections under the Manage Loans tab about those various repayment plans and things too that you may want to bookmark. So all very good information.